This year, you might have been one of the millions of people who tuned in to Summer Games Fest, the now annual event where Geoffrey Keighley gets up on stage and talks about video games and the video game industry. And this year, it started off in a way that was notably different from other events in the past. Geoff Keighley this year decided to start off by showing what have been the top 10 best-selling games on Steam for 2025, but with a very specific intention. He wanted to showcase that while there are big names that you might expect and big publishers, in reality it's a pretty even split between established companies and studios with tons of money to produce their games and small indie upstarts that are now taking up a bigger and bigger portion of the pie. This is a narrative that has been brewing under the surface within the games industry, as we keep seeing signs of incompetence from more established studios and publishers, as we, the customers, get tired of being fed undercooked, unfinished games that are then patched over and remonetized with either extensive DLC, cosmetics, monetization systems, or remasters. As the price of those games continues to go up, more and more people are championing for the failure of those established companies and the triumph of the new underdogs, the indie upstarts that are looking to change the game. That narrative has been brewing under the surface, I would know, because I haven't shut up about it for the last 2 years, but now it's the mainstream take. Now it's on the stage at Summer Games Fest. The conversation isn't, will indies take over? It's, indies are taking over. But there's a more important question there, and you probably guessed it because I probably spoiled it in the title of this video. Can that actually happen? Is this just cope? Are we just looking for excuses to complain about the subpar products that some of these companies put out? Or are we actually championing the indie games because the studios and the publishers behind them are meant to inherit this industry by giving us valid alternatives that are just going to end up kicking out the big guys who have lost their way? Well, the short answer to the question is yes. And the long answer to the question is the rest of this video that I have carefully made with a lot of details and numbers and explanations of a lot of things. So please don't just take the yes at face value. I put a lot of effort into making sure that the yes makes sense. So how is this going to work? Well, we're going to address some of the biggest concerns regarding this whole narrative of indie games taking over. Some of the very valid reasons that people say that it makes no sense and it doesn't matter, and it's all just pie in the sky ideas and copium. We're going to break down some of those statistics and leave this video with not just a pretty good understanding of where the industry is sitting at, but also where it's heading towards. And all of that should matter to you because you're watching this video and you probably really like video games. You probably really like them like the way I like them, which is like a lot. You know, video games, man, they're awesome. Now, if at any point you like this video and what I'm talking about, please make sure to hit the like button because that helps the video reach farther into the algorithm, helps spread what I hope is an interesting message and one of positivity and hope out there. And if you really like the video, do not subscribe. Wait until the end of the video. Make sure that what I do here is something that you want to subscribe to, because that's valuable. All right, the first thing that needs to be addressed is the very big fancy thing of these are the games that have sold the most. Selling a ton of copies of your game is pretty great, but that doesn't mean you're making the most money. You see, part of my job here as totally not a journalist on YouTube is to read pretty much every quarterly report from every major video game company and kind of get a good sense of where we're headed and where to keep my nose at. And if there's one thing that's repeated throughout the entire industry, no question about it, is the fact that the grand majority of the revenue, the actual money that goes in through gaming, is all concentrated in a very, very small amount of games, and all of them are live services. Live services meaning that they are multiplayer games that continue on forever with constant updates and changes to them, so you can think of anything from Call of Duty is kind of a live service, Fortnite is a live service, Apex Legends, and anything that could fit into that sort of thing. And their intention is to occupy as much of your time as possible so that you can justify spending money on things in them. This is unfortunately not a hypothesis. This is just the facts. You see, the headlines of the best-selling games is really cool, but top grossing is a really important part of this, with games like Fortnite and Call of Duty and GTA 5 being among the top always. And when we say among the top, it's that they take up an incredibly large percentage of the total amount of money moved. So sure, we can always see headlines about how the top-selling games on PlayStation most recently have actually been a lot of Xbox games, actually. But that doesn't mean that they're the ones that are raking in the most money. Those are just the ones that are selling as games. Most of the money is actually in those microtransactions and monthly expenditure on season passes and battle passes and all of these things. And that is the first thing that people will bring up when you mention that these indie games are selling so much and that they're making so much money. They'll say that it's just pennies compared to what live service games sell. But that leads me to a very important question. Do we care? At the end of the day, the market is pretty simple. Sure, there's companies that are attempting to make the most money possible. And ever since the appearance of live service games and their enormous potential for that revenue, we've seen so many different studios and so many different publishers pivot to trying to make as many live services as possible, because if you have a good one, that's basically all your money. Make a hit game that has addictive microtransactions of some sort in it, and congratulations, everybody's laughing all the way to the bank. But that is honestly the extent of the impact of where that revenue goes. It is the pursuit of other companies allocating resources into potentially failed projects, sometimes incredibly failed projects, attempting to chase that cash cow. But it doesn't actually change how the rest of the market works. This is why this argument falls flat, in my opinion. They can keep their revenue. At the end of the day, if somebody makes a game and it costs them, let's say, $10 million to produce it, and then they sell that game and they make $300 million back, what's happening there is that they can now make more games. Sure, they could waste some of that money chasing a live service that doesn't actually create any more profit, just throw 300 million down the drain type of stuff. But they could also just make cooler games. You know when we've seen that happen before? With everything before live services. Even technically during a lot of live services, depending on when you want to count them kind of starting. Some people like to say that World of Warcraft was really like the big one in that space. And throughout World of Warcraft's lifetime, we still saw plenty of studios just make a good game that made them more money than it cost them to make, so that they can make more games. So that's step one. That's step one. Yes. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 with its AI generated skins and its weird things and all that garbage makes a lot of money. But that really doesn't matter. It matters to shareholders, but it doesn't matter to the industry at large, because at this point in time, that live service pie and the type of customer that spends their time there and their money is they kind of have a full plate. Really, this video isn't geared towards them, although if you're the type of person who plays Call of Duty every day, welcome. There's great games elsewhere as well, please play them. So it's really not that big of an issue. Moves us on to point number 2. I hear so many people say all of the damn time that indie games are inferior to those that have higher budgets, as if somehow throwing more money into a project was going to make it better, as if somehow that money that they're throwing into the project wasn't going to just be siphoned up by a bunch of greedy people giving out stupid contracts and mismanaging it and misguided attempts of stupidness while overpaying people who have nothing to do with actually making a good game. I'm not mad. You're mad. But sure, let's pretend that because they're indie games, Expedition 33 and Baldur's Gate 3 and Hades and Stardew Valley and Repo and Lethal Company, these are all bad games. Schedule 1, I barely know her. Factorio, RimWorld, Hollow Knight? To be honest, I've never even heard of this so-called Undertale. I hope this is getting my point across. But let's ignore that. Instead, let's focus on something very interesting, which is that indie games are kind of the Wild West because they don't have the marketing, the security, they don't have the big presence to be up on stage to actually reach their audience, which means that the games that do have that extra marketing push are the ones who will be successful, and therefore nothing in the market will ever change. But once again, we have to ask the question, what about that matters to us? You see, precisely because a lot of video game coverage has now kind of gone back to being about word of mouth, it's just that word of mouth is now Twitter and YouTube and TikTok. Everything kind of has the chance to be successful, whether its marketing budget is 50 million or 1 million. The real question that we have to ask is if the game that has a 50 million marketing budget is better than the one that has 1 million. How does the marketing budget affect us? At the end of the day, we the customer end up paying for those costs no matter what. We're trending towards a world where if a game's budget is super inflated, all that's gonna happen is that they're gonna charge us $90 for it, and then they're also gonna sneak in some extra cosmetics in the super deluxe edition that doesn't even contain the game. Meanwhile, companies that can operate with lower expenses and put out a game can operate at much higher profit margins. Or if we wanted to look at this without words that make you fall asleep, let's think of it this way. Concord cost $300 million to develop and market and the whole shebang, and it was sold for $40. So let's imagine a world where Concord sold 3 million copies for $120 million. Yeah, it wouldn't break even. Now, to be fair, I'm oversimplifying a lot of how expenses and continuous expenses of something like a live service are, and also the fact that Concord would have had additional ways of monetization, but I just want to compare that with a recent game that sold 3 million copies, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, made by Sandfall, a tiny studio of 33 people, plus all of the contractors and external people who helped on that. Expedition 33 did not cost $300 million. Expedition 33 is such a surprise hit compared to its budget that with its sales, Sandfall has now guaranteed itself 2, 3, 4 maybe, 4 more projects at the same scale as Expedition 33. Because that budget was kept low, they get to make a lot of money, and they get to put that money into making more games with hopefully pretty low budgets as well that will afford them great profit margin as well as some room to breathe and experiment, because that's what they want to do. Meanwhile, Concord and its $300 million budget, you get my point. This has to do with two things: what we define as success and what we define as sustainable. So instead, let me ask you the question. Would you consider Concord successful? Sorry, that's not my point. My point is that I believe most people would consider something successful if it makes more money than what it costs to produce, not how much hypothetical money it could make if it were to be successful. And that is very much tied to sustainability, which is really just making more money than you spend so that you can continue to either exist at that level or expand if you wanted to, while carefully calculating the risks. So when we talk about indie games taking over, when we talk about the future of the games industry being indie games, we're not talking about everybody just sitting down to play these sorts of games forever. That's not what it means. What it actually means is that the studios that are currently finding success, tremendous success with these games, are now put in a position of power. They get to take the massive amounts of money that they've made and reinvest it into whatever they choose. And they could choose to invest it into terrible projects, mediocre, cut and copy clones of games that we've played too many times. They could choose to invest it into another live service chasing money because they got greedy, or they could choose to invest it into just more good games. We've seen plenty of examples already of smaller studios growing, finding success, and both examples of what they've done with it or what they intend to do with it because they're right there at the moment. One of my favorite little examples is Inner Sloth with Among Us. They created Outer Sloth, a publisher, to help bring more games to the market and to use their resources in a very friendly way towards new projects in order to help them across the finish line, to help put more games out there and give them the best chance at success. Taking all of the money that Innersloth made from Among Us and putting it into a publisher, while it could not work out for them, is still a great benefit to the industry. Because the publisher there is acting as a curator and as a help to smaller indies to push bigger and better games, and maybe potentially in the future also finance the development of games. Maybe in the future even have studios under them, and maybe in the future continue to do good stuff instead of turning into the publishers that we know today, like the Ubisofts and the EAs. It's a pretty natural transition for a lot of other studios as well. And publishing can be one of the important ways that a studio kind of grows out. Sometimes they just grow by taking on more projects, something that a studio like Larian, responsible for Baldur's Gate 3, has said that they are currently doing by producing more games than they were before. But Larian, while we're at it, is a great example of indie games are taking over. Larian, even with the use of crowdfunding, made their own games, and they made fantastic games in the Divinity Original Sin franchise. Specifically, Divinity Original Sin 2, I think, is a game that is beloved by many, many people. And they took that success and that money and they invested it all into Baldur's Gate 3. It paid off. They made a ton of money, and now they can kind of comfortably work on more stuff. And maybe because those things continue to be successful, they continue to grow and they make more and more great video games at the same time, which means overall we have more great games to play. But they could also take some of that money and put it into a publishing branch and start helping other studios create great games. That really is up to them, but it's exactly the same way that the juggernauts that we have today have gone and strayed too far. And it's pretty easy to imagine how a lot of different companies might be taking those steps now. Companies like Warhorse over in the Czech Republic with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Companies like Semiwork, responsible for Repo. Other success stories like Pocket Pair with Palworld, or Tyler's Video Game Studio, which started just as Tyler with Schedule 1. Hazelight with It Takes Two and Split Fiction. All of these have the opportunity to grow into whatever they wanted, and their potential, because of the success they've obtained, is pretty much limitless. Point is, we are actively seeing how every single day, every single major success story from a game with a low budget and a tremendous impact on the industry isn't just a big surprise indie hit. It's the potential for a brand new studio to break out and be another one of those that could break the mold. It could be one that in 10 years' time could be massive. It could be one of the juggernauts, titans of the industry, one of the studios that are most respected. Think things like Larian, or in the minds of some people, I guess CD Projekt Red. I really like Cyberpunk and Witcher 3, okay? Sue me. Please don't sue me. I mean, I like Cyberpunk after the updates. Like, I'm not crazy. We can forgive, but never forget. But here's the final question. How is that a takeover? Aren't they just putting more games out into the market? Well, yes and no. See, the market isn't infinite. This is one of my favorite things in like the video game industry, is that there's so many people that just keep believing that this is a bubble that will never burst. Specifically the live service stuff, not just like battle royales or whatever, but gacha games, all parts of it. Gaming in the last years, and yes, the pandemic had to do with it, has seen enormous growth. But the most important part about it wasn't the pandemic, it was the fact that everybody has a smartphone. Video games have transitioned, and generationally, a lot of the people who used to consider video games as just this nerdy thing for a new generation are now struggling parents or people who maybe are lucky enough to get into their first mortgage. Video games are no longer that. They are for everyone, because video games are on your phone, on your PlayStation, on your Amazon Fire Stick. They're all there, all vying for your attention and for your money, but that also means we've reached the point where it's kind of difficult to expand the demographic. Video games have found their way into the hands of most people who would ever be interested in them. Sure, there's always a little bit more room for expansion, but not the massive growth that we have seen recently. And we, as humans, and I'm sorry to say it, but this is actually true, only have a limited amount of time, attention, and money on this earth. We cannot play everything. We cannot be invested in every live service at the same time, which means that they are all competing for our attention. And this is why I will continue to say over and over and over again, that we are the customer and we demand better and we get it. Sorry, I got a bit sidetracked there. But the thing is, the pie isn't infinitely growing. It's the pie now. They're all fighting for a piece of it. And we are the pie. Haven't you ever wanted to be a pie? We ask the important questions on this channel. The more studios that keep putting out these excellent video games that respect the player's time and money, that come with actual passion and innovation or an understanding of what the customer wants, who aren't carving out a niche, they're just demanding attention from people, the more that others will have to suffer. Sure, I'm not saying that Schedule 1 or Clair Obscur are competing with Fortnite, but they are competing with pretty much everything else. And we go back to that point about what do we care about? You personally might care a bit about live services. I know I do. I play a lot of them. I have tons of fun with them and I respect what they are and a lot of the bad things that come with them. But if you're just the type of person that wants to play good video game-ass video games, the type that we've always known of creating an experience that just comes ready on day one and you get to sit down and enjoy it. It has a start, it has an ending, and it's just an experience for you to dive into. That entire sector is now being taken over because the highest quality games that are really being pushed out in it are actually the games being done by these smaller studios that are now growing, that are finding more and more success and will continue to make more and more games that we should be excited about. And when it isn't one of these studios, it's an offshoot of them. It's veteran talent leaving to pursue their vision. It's things like Rebel Wolves forming from CD Projekt Red. It's things like Sandfall coming from 3 ex-Ubisoft veterans. It's about them taking up space. And when some of those giant corporations that have so much bloat in their budgets, think something like Assassin's Creed Shadows, when they can't report profit margins that are even close to what some of these indie games are doing, and when their live service attempts to make the money they need fail, when these companies decide to turn around and say, hey, maybe we should just be making good old-fashioned video games, that seemed like a more sustainable method than our dumping tons and tons of money chasing the maximum potential profit margin, it will very likely be too late. Sure, they can always do an incredible job and actually compete back in that market, but that's just good for us, right? They'll just make great games, and if it's the best one, we'll play it, because that's what we need. We need them to compete, but we need them to compete back in the sector we want them to. And because indie games are the ones doing it, and because the live service market is currently what it is, it's inevitable that we're going to be eaten pretty well. So when we say that indie games are taking over, we're talking about that. We're talking about projects with scopes and budgets that are more under control, that better understand what the customer wants and are willing to give it to them. Games that are being made with passion and vision instead of the safety of making sure that the ideal target demographic is in our sightlines. And as more of them pop up and more of them find success and continue to grow, the more competition there's going to be for your time and your money. And the more competition there is, the better every single game will have to be. We talk a lot about the collapse of AAA. We talk a lot about the takeover of indies. But to the question, are they really taking over? Well, I hope this video answered that question. I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to do a pretty deep dive into the console and PC market and everything that's coming up with it as a bit of a companion piece. Actually, it's the bigger, longer, more dense video of the two coming up next week. So if you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe. We're almost at 100K, which is actually like incredible, but it'd be really cool to get there. I think they give you a plaque or something, so that'd be nice, I think. What matters most, though, is that I appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I hope that you get to leave this video feeling very positive about the future of games and understanding better where all the hype about the changes in the industry are coming from. Not just something to parrot out there, but hopefully a bit deeper, a bit more of an understanding of it, so that you can truly be certain that video games aren't going anywhere. They're just going to keep getting better. Trust me. A very special thanks to the patrons and members of the channel here on YouTube that directly support what I do and are up on the wall. More info on that in the description below if you would like to join, but I am eternally grateful to each and every one of you. And as always, go out there, enjoy some great video games, and I'll see you again very soon.